start to lose my light.
Okay.
And I'm out, you can't tell, but my studio is out on my lanai, so I'm just lit by the daylight, such as it is. So welcome, everybody.
Tatiana, are you recording?
Thanks.
I have started.
Okay.
Okay, hi,
So
Bill
should I just start, or
Schneider.
you want to say
William
something?
Schneider.
There we go.
And if people have questions, please put them, type them into the chat. I will monitor the chat.
Are you going to make him big on the screen?
And
You
then
have
you
to
can
pin
double
him.
tap or click on the screen, or Tatiana, you want to pin it and mute all of us except me?
No, I think you have, everybody has to pin Bill.
Okay, but how about
Yeah.
muting?
I think, well, since I didn't mute them in the beginning, let me just see. I haven't.
But make sure I can be heard so that I can read the questions.
Why
in
don't
the
we
chat.
just ask everybody to mute themselves?
Okay, please mute yourself.
And please pin Bill's picture, and then he'll be then in the spotlight for everyone. And
All right.
put it on full screen.
Okay.
Find him again. Bill, speak.
All right. So are we ready to roll?
Can't find him.
This is a
No.
picture of me.
You
Anyway,
keep scrolling until you find them, and please, in the meantime,
Yeah,
please
or
mute
we could
yourself,
just,
everybody.
okay, yeah.
please mute yourself, everybody. Thanks.
okay, welcome everybody. And glad you could join me today. Unfortunately, it's like 85 degrees here. And so,
Shut up.
and I wear vinyl gloves when I paint, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But so anyway, that's me complaining about the weather. I'm sure I get no empathy whatsoever. But in any case, so we're going to do an eye demo, and I thought I would start by just mentioning a couple of little things. Number one, when I went to the American Academy of Art, I started using pastels in Bill Park's life drawing class. I studied life drawing with him every Saturday for 8 years. And after a couple of years, he said, well, why don't you start using color? And I said, great, I'll bring in my oil paints. And he said, no, you can't use oil paints in here. We don't have ventilation, which I later found out wasn't exactly true, but he wanted me to use pastel. So I started using pastel and I loved it. But I was doing what everybody else was doing at the American Academy. That is, I was using little cross hatches, check mark, using the tip of the pastel. So then I started taking a series of workshops with Harley Brown. And the first workshop, Harley had his pastels all broken in half, and he was using the side like it was a 2-inch brush, and he was blending after every stroke. And being younger and sort of a smart ass, I said, well, when I went to the American Academy, they said that we should use cross hatchings. And Harley said to me, really? When you look at your face in the mirror, does it look smooth or does it have a bunch of little cross hatches on it? And I said, well, it looks smooth, but, and he said, exactly. And so I adopted his technique, which does a couple of things. One, it looks more realistic than a cross-hatched thing, although you can work up cross-hatching to get almost to the point where the many layers end up blending what's underneath. But also, if you use blending, then when you put a few strokes that you leave alone, you have great contrast between the blended and the unblended. So for whatever that's worth, I pass that on. I found it very helpful. So before I start, I'm going to talk about entering the kingdom of heaven. And what I mean by that is we must become as little children to enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh my God, he's bringing religion in. No, I'm defining it, the kingdom of heaven, as entering the mindset of an artist. And think about this. How does an infant view the world? An infant, a little babe in arms, doesn't see anything. It sees this moving mosaic of different shapes and values. And then over time, it learns that if it's distressed, if it needs its diaper changed or, it's hungry or needs to be burped or whatever, there's this recurring pattern of shapes and it learns a name for them and it calls it mom. And then it starts to learn other names. It learns, eye and nose and so on and so forth. And then about the age of 2, starts stringing together these different things into little short sentences. No nap, more candy, whatever. That is the human mode of thought. We humans have evolved to manipulate symbols because it's much faster. If you're out in the jungle and you see rustling amongst the bushes, but you don't know that they're called bushes and you don't know that it's rustling and you don't know any of that stuff. You just notice these changes in shapes and values and colors. It takes a lot of processing power, and it might be faster just to say, bush is rustling, maybe tiger, run. It's evolutionarily, it had a benefit. It is a detriment for artists because the biggest problem that we have as artists is that we don't paint what we see, we paint the symbols for what we see. And what I mean by that is, I did a little preparation here. The universal eye symbol. Can you see that? It's an oval with a circle in it. If you ask a 5-year-old to draw an eye, that's what they'll draw. If you ask a 60-year-old who's not an artist to draw an eye, they'll draw the same symbol. And we artists tend to, as we progress, we refine our symbols, but we're still in symbol land. And this is the point of all of this. Our left brain, which is the part of our brains that manipulates symbols, has very low tolerance for the symbols being broken. And so if you don't put an outline around the eye, in other words, maybe you draw the shadow shape of the upper lid, but you don't draw the bottom part of the lower lid, it takes it out of the realm of symbols. The left brain says, I can't deal with this crap, I'm out of here. And the poor little right brain says, well, I don't know about what you're painting, but I see there's kind of a dark area and it goes up in one side and then it flattens out and then it goes down a little bit, but not quite as far. And it's a little pink at the edge. And oh my God, I just drew an eye. If you're in the zone, if you're seeing the world as an infant sees it, you will surprise yourself as you start to complete your paintings because you'll suddenly go, oh, I was just paying so much attention to all of these shapes and angles and values that I didn't realize that I was painting an eye or painting lips or painting a nose or glasses. Anything that has a name probably also has a visual symbol. So that's my little lecture on symbols and entering the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven being seeing as an artist involves actually seeing the way that we saw the world before the age of 2. So that's all we have to do is go back. So anyway, so having said all of that, I'm going to do an eye demo and I might as well just get started on it. And if you have questions and want to, if there's anything tremendously urgent, Evelyn will relay it to me since I can't see what's on the screen when I'm painting. So I'm going to set up, eyes sit in sockets. So I'm just going to set this up by kind of painting the flesh that's around it. And I'm using as my reference, I don't know if you probably can't see it, but over here I've got a painting. I guess it's kind of in the corner of the screen. And I'm using that as the reference for the eyes loosely. I'm going to make it big so you can see what I'm doing. So she was under cool light, so I'm starting with the temperature of the light. And I'm trying to get some of her skin color.
we have a question. What kind of paper are you using?
I'm using paper that I hate, UArt. And I'm using it because I won it in a contest. I probably shouldn't say that. If somebody's from UArt on here, I didn't really mean it. But I won it in a contest. They were supposed to send me 10 sheets, but instead they sent me 10 cases.
Oh
So
my God.
I give it away. I use it for demos because I always paint on sanded paper because it holds so much more pastel. But, you know, there's no magic to the paper other than a sanded paper will hold a lot more layers.
He blends. I don't do this. I just do it in areas where you need the color to be solid.
If you could please put your comments or questions in the chat, I'll read them to Bill, and then could you please mute yourselves? Thank you.
Yeah, and I heard that about blending. I studied with Harley Brown, and he's the one that got me out of the world of cross hatching and into the world of blending because it looks more, particularly if you're doing flesh does not have a bunch of little cross hatches on it. It's smooth, relatively smooth. And so if you blend, it starts out that way rather than trying to work up to that. You know, Harley uses that technique and I adopted it from him. So for what it's worth. Okay. So I'm going to make this a fairly large eye. And whoever's got their little kids going there.
Yes,
Please
anyone
mute.
who's coming in, please mute and turn off your videos.
Okay. This is my drawing. Notice it is not an outline. I will tell you this. When I teach my workshops, I tell students this all the time. If you put an outline around the eye, you are dead in the water right from the get-go. Because whatever you put on your support, your brain will accept that. And the eyes are so soft that as soon as you put a hard edge around it, your mental computer, your brain tries to run the calculations that will make a sharp line equal a soft edge. And it's an impossible equation, but the brain tries to do it anyway. And so typically, if you put an outline around, you end up having eyes that look like a zombie or an alien impersonating a human or a Stepford wife or something, but it's generally not a good look. It's not a soft look. Because the eyes, if you freeze them, they're always in motion. So,
Bill, we got a question. What kind of sanded paper do you prefer?
the kind you can't get anymore, Kitty Wallace. But Pastel Premier is a pretty good substitute. Dakota sells it. What? I only put my face in when I'm talking. So, so anyway, okay, so I've got the positioning of this large eye, but the eyes sit in sockets. So I'm going to start to put a socket in this area. So I'm just trying to get a color and a value to equal the area of this eye socket. And I'm going to pop the eye in there. And I've already erased my drawing, but that's okay because all I had was a couple of dots anyway. So all I'm trying to do is depict the shadow shape of the socket. And by the way, you'll notice how incredibly sloppy I am when I do all of this. You know, I know when I started out, I was so concerned about trying to get everything right. And I confused accuracy with precision. Precision, we don't want precision, but we do want accuracy. And I guess the difference is this. If I say I am 5'7.12846532 inches tall, that's very precise. It's out to the 11th decimal point. However, it's very inaccurate. Better to say I'm about 6'2". It's not very precise, but it's much more accurate. So we want to have things generally in the right space. We want to be generally accurate rather than precisely inaccurate. And by the way, I'm just telling you how I paint. There are other people that do really, really tight, highly rendered paintings right from the get-go, and they create beautiful work. I prefer it to be softer, more impressionistic, and looser looking. I like loose. So I can put my drawing back in here. And what I'm taking great care not to draw the bottom, the circle around the eye, because I do not want to be in symbol land. There's also shadows under that upper lid. And this model in my reference was under cool light. She was in my studio, which has north light windows, my studio up north. And so cool light tends to create warm shadows. And we can talk about that if I remember.
Bill, if you could
discover-
talk about the pastel sticks that you're using.
That I'm happy to talk about. Here's my go-to set. I was hoping somebody would ask that question. It's made by Jack Richardson. It's the William Schneider 80-stick portrait and figure set. And what I did to create this, I took all of the pastels that I loved and have been using over the years. Sennelier, Unison, Schminke, whatever. I had a whole raft of different pastels that were, and I took all of my go-to colors and I put them on a sheet of this UART paper, actually on 3 sheets. And then Richardson sent me their entire I think it was 533 sticks of pastels that they make. They're hand-rolled pastels. They're actually really nice. I think when they first came out with their hand-rolled pastels, they were a little too hard, but then they got the formula right. So anyway, they sent me the entire set, and then I went through and I matched them to match all of the colors that I use. So these are all my go-to colors from all the different manufacturers. And I think
And
that
we thank
Jamie's
Richardson.
just typing something with a link to Judson where you can order these things.
And we thank Richardson for supporting the demo by sending Bill.
Oh,
a
yes.
check.
I forgot that they supported the demo. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Darren, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are awesome pastels. And that's now, I used to, when I was going around the country teaching workshops, I used to schlep like 8 different boxes of pastels. Now I take this box. And I do take a little box of Terry Ludwig's Intense Darks #2, because nobody makes intense darks like Terry Ludwig. And the Richardson darks are very good, but the Terry Ludwigs, they're just darker. And that's always the challenge with pastel. So anyway. One of the things you'll notice as I do this, I'm going to state things and then wipe them out and schmoozle them out and restate them and do it again. I'll end up restating all of the components of this eye 5 or 6 times. So I'm starting to put in the dark, which is normally the darkest dark on a human head, but it's so small I don't use it as a reference point, but it's the pupil, because it's basically a hole through the iris and very dark in there. So I'm putting that there. My model had kind of blue-green eyes. And again, notice how sloppy I am. I'm giving you all permission to be sloppy as hell. Because again, the eyes are the window to the soul, but that window is always in motion. And so if we freeze them and make them hard edged, they don't look right. It looks like there's, at best, it looks like the person's mildly psychotic. And that's normally not a good look, especially in that condition. So I'm already starting to restate some of these things. I've got this shadow. The upper lid has thickness to it. By the way, I'm using the side of my pastel, and I'm trying to go across the form, meaning instead of going with the flow of the eyelid, I'm going across it. I'm making little strokes. I've discovered that if I do it that way, it looks, A, it's more accurate, and B, it's more powerful. I guess one of the important things that I learned, one of the great aha moments for me, when I started out, I would start to do an eye, and I might have a decent drawing, like in charcoal or something. And then as soon as I started to put color down, it got all wonky, and I got frustrated, and I'd wipe it out and I'd try to start over again. I wanted it to look finished in the beginning. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to any painting. And if you can't make ending things if you're only in phase 1, you have to trust that if you keep doing the process and you do the same process all the time, that eventually it will, that it's going to work out. And so you just kind of, you learn to trust that even though the thing looks all ugly and wonky and not the way you want it to, that it's ultimately going to get there. Unless, of course, this is the one. And what I mean by that is, I've not had this happen yet, but I know that at some point I'm going to do a demo in front of a bunch of people and it's going to all fall apart and be irretrievable. And I know that because I saw Richard Schmid paint a portrait and it started to fall apart. And I went, yes, because, because he was human and he rescued it. But it wasn't, I'd seen him demo a number of times and they always just flowed out and he'd put down 4 strokes and it looked perfect. It was like, oh my God, he is God, I am not worthy. And, we're all artists are on a journey. And the good news is the journey never ends. Unlike other professions, if you want something easy.
Might, yes, I did feed him.
I just lost, I was looking at Evelyn and she vanished. I hope that I'm still visible here.
Zoom call.
Anyway, we're all on a
Zoom
journey.
meeting. Sorry, I
And we
hit the wrong
tend to-
button, Bill.
I'm sorry, what?
I hit the wrong button.
Okay, well,
I'm here.
there you are.
I've been here.
Okay, you're my talisman. If I lose you, I'm afraid. I become sore afraid. Okay. So my point is, we're all on a journey, a never-ending journey, and we tend to put people that are a level or two ahead of us on a pedestal. And if you want to disabuse yourself of that, find somebody that you think is a pastel god, and then on a break, go up and say, what are you working on? And they will say, oh, well, I need to improve my values and my drawing's a little off and I always make the nose too short. And they'll have things that they're working on too, to try to get better. And somehow that's helpful and reassuring to know that we're all human and we're all on the same journey. So anyway, I'm gonna restate this pupil a little bit.
So what are you working on, Bill?
I am working on, believe it or not, I'm working on more accurate drawing. One of the things that I had for a goal for myself, by the way, this is a great truism. If you have a goal and you write it down and tape it to your mirror so you see it every day, I put an annual goal down. My goal this year was to fill an entire notebook with drawings. And I thought, how the hell am I going to do that? And we're shut down because of COVID. I don't have models, blah, blah, blah. But we're now in November and I've got like 10 pages left in this notebook. It's about that thick because I've been going to virtual open studios. And so if you just write down what you're trying to achieve, your subconscious mind will take hold and make it happen. Unless I'm wrong. So this doesn't look like much yet. And there are certain things that I am dying to put in. Like I want to put that highlight in that eye and so badly. But I know that if I try to do it and paint around it, it's going to ruin the painting. So I have to wait for those little details till the very end of this. So what I'm doing now is kind of setting things up. The nose, by the way, is over here. So on the inner corner of the eye, there tends to get a little pinker, a little redder, right by where the tear duct is. And I guess I can show you this now. This incredibly sloppy eye, rather than painting the positive shape of the iris, I have let that be all mushy, and I'm going to paint the negative shape of the so-called white of the eye, the stuff that's around it. And I always call it the so-called white of the eye, because that's what Bill Parks called it. And he called it that because he wanted us to know that it's not white. You know, when it comes to rendering and painting, we're our own worst enemy. It's a little bit lighter, but it's back in the eye socket for one. So it's a little bit lighter, a little bit cooler. And the two sides tend to be different values. So I do what Harley does. I'm blending. This is my main tool, my little finger. I'm blending almost every stroke. In fact, I'm blending every stroke until I get to a few that I don't want blended. So I'm starting to use that to carve out the iris. And by the way, I will share this with you. We all have something that is a habitual mistake that we tend to make. You know, if you have certain habitual mistakes, people just recognize that as your style, quote unquote. But like Modigliani, you know, he did not have the horizontal dimensions in the same scale as the vertical dimensions, so he ended up with these elongated figures. So did Boldini. Not terribly so, but he he made all of these society women like 9 heads high. So they were tall and thin and graceful, which probably didn't hurt his commission business. Yeah. But in any case, I digress. My habitual mistake, if I don't think about it and actively work on it, is this. I will tend to make the iris in the eye too big. And so then it doesn't look right. So then I make the eye a little bit larger. Now, all of a sudden, if I had 2 eyes here and this became larger, then they would look like they were too close together. So then I start chasing, but it all goes back to having made the iris too big. And so that's one of the things, it's one of my personal checklists that I try to make sure that I didn't do that. I'm fairly decent at being able to talk and paint at the same time, but sometimes, particularly as we get closer to the end, I'm going to get a little hung up. So Evelyn, if I forget to talk, ask me a question or something to jog me.
Well, we do have a couple questions. One is, what are you filming your demo with? And if the question is, what are you broadcasting on? You're on your iPhone, right?
Right, I'm on an iPhone 8.
iPhone 8. And then, and we are recording it and we'll work on getting that available to our members. The other question is, has drawing faces larger than life in the last several years given you another perspective, helped you and or changed your process in any way? That's from Tatiana.
Okay. Yes, it has changed it in that you get sort of used to working in a particular scale. And if you change the scale, then it tends to throw off your sense of what proportions are a little bit, or at least it did for me. And so I found it helpful to be able to change scale. When I was at the American Academy, they issued some thou shalt nots. And one of them was, thou shalt not make a head over life size because, quote unquote, it looks kind of grotesque and so on and so forth. But I've discovered if you make a head 30 inches high, I've got a piece in the OPA show in Charleston right now. And it has, I know the gallery had an offer there. They had somebody that wanted the discount if they bought 3 paintings of mine. I said, go for it. But the point being, if you make it really big so that it looks intentional, then, then it doesn't look quote unquote grotesque. By the way, Kwang Ho you all know who Kwang Ho is. He has a great quote. And I quote him on this all the time. And it is, as an artist, if you make a decision, it's always right. And what? And if you think about it, if you make a decision, it's always right because it looks like you painted with intent.
Tell us what you're doing now with the light blue.
Okay, if you think of the structure of an eye from the side, it goes in, the eye socket goes in, then it hits this crease, and then the top lid is kind of projecting out, it covers the eyeball. So this top lid is catching light. It's in the socket, but it's still getting light, the descending light. So I'm just trying to show that value change and the temperature change, indicating that that's in the light. And I'm going to keep monkeying with it a little bit.
Do you have advice on making sure that the eye is looking in the direction that you want it to look in? So
Yeah,
it's the shape of the
aim the
iris,
pupils
but
where you want them to go.
put the pupils, the shape of the iris.
Well, yeah, unless you're really very foreshortened on the eye, the iris is going to look pretty much round. But if you have 2 eyes, the tendency, particularly when working from life, if you have a model and they're moving their eyes around, you get one eye aiming one direction, the other one aiming a different direction. And that's a little disconcerting. So I always just think about making sure that the pupils are aiming in the direction that I want them to go to.
And it looks like you're also putting the highlight on the lid above the pupil.
I'm sorry, what?
You're putting the highlight on the lid above the pupil.
Yeah, it's not even highlight yet. It's more, I'm trying to show the plane changes.
Yeah.
Here's, every time that there is a plane change, there is a color change on a form. And that's because each of the planes is facing a different direction, meaning it's reflecting something different. And so anyway.
Carol Struck-Wasson wanted to know which virtual drawing sessions you're using. I've seen you at the palette. What else are you?
Yeah, that's basically it, the palette. And there's another virtual session. Jeff Wells sent me a link to it. And it's with, I think, the New York Academy of Art or something. But they don't charge for it. And so, you don't have to be a member, and they didn't charge. So I've done a couple of those. I've done a couple with Whitney Masters
Yeah.
as well, where you pay $15 or whatever to do the thing, and that's good.
Yeah, her site is I'll put it in the chat. She's charging $5 a session, and she's got a lot of different models and different setups, clothed, not clothed, fast, slow, long pose. I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah, anything, we don't draw enough. Nobody draws enough. Maybe Robert Liberace draws enough. Everybody else, not so much. So I messed up the carving out of the iris. See what I mean by stating it and restating it? But it keeps getting closer and closer. I think of it as sneaking up on the final image. I'm going to do a magic stroke at the end of this. It's going to make the whole thing snap into a better look. But I have to set it up before I can put in the magic stroke, which drives me crazy because I want it there right from the beginning, and I can't get it there from the beginning, unfortunately. So I guess that she has an eyebrow. Oh, and I should also mention, if anybody that wants to can add me on Instagram and Facebook at William Schneider Fine Art. And I just launched a YouTube channel. So I'm going to start sharing a lot more demos and other things. If you go there right now, you'll find a YouTube, my sole YouTube thing that says I'm launching YouTube, and I hope you join me. And that's it. But there's going to be one tomorrow. I'm going to do a charcoal drawing in hyperlapse. And so it'll be a fast charcoal drawing. So please subscribe to William Schneider Fine Art on YouTube and click the bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos. You can also visit schneiderart.com. That's my my website. And if you click schneiderart.com/links, that gives you links to my pastel sets, instructional video, workshops, blah, blah, blah. So they'll send us the commercial.
Thanks,
So
Phil.
anyway. Yes?
No,
You
I
start
said
to think-
thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. So it's starting, it didn't look so good when it started out, but it's getting more I-ness, if that's a word. So where it starts to roll out, you're starting to see some of the local color as well as the temperature of the light.
Now, I've noticed that the light is changing. Is that affecting you?
The light is not changing probably as much as it looks on the camera. I've still got, I have usable light for another half hour. And I hope to be done well before then. I'm actually getting pretty close. See, I can now do the same thing where I'm painting the negative shape. I had all of this dark of the eye socket went out too far. So I can start to carve in with the light of the flesh and the light. There's some, I'm not going to render a nose over here, but I can get some of that transition. By the way, let's talk about skin. Skin to win. Skin is interesting and particularly suited to pastel because skin is translucent. You know, if you get murdered and they find your body, they will cut little thin slices and put it on a microscope and shine light through it because they can to see, you know, to determine various things. So when we see skin, we see through it to what's underneath. So areas where the bone is closer, like on the nasal bone, you know, right here, or on the top of the zygomatic arch, or on your forehead, we'll start to see some of that ivoryish color of the bone itself. And areas where there's a lot of capillaries, like the nose, you know, we evolved in an ice age, a lot of it. So we've got rich blood supply. The capillaries are coming out, so they're all warmed up, and it's red blood. So we're seeing there's a lot of redness in those areas. Areas where there's veins tend to be more violety, like around the eye. So we see through the skin, we see the color of the skin itself. And, you know, there are no black people and white people. We're all just different shades of sepia because there's one pigment and it's the exact same pigment. Some people have more of it, some have less of it. College students have less of it, and then they try to sit out in the sun so they get more of it, but they actually get wrinkles and skin cancer later in life. But I digress. So we see the pigment of the skin itself, and then at the very surface, we see the reflection of the light source. So there's 3 levels. Pastel is particularly good at capturing those, much better than oil paint. Because we can, especially if you blend like I do and like Harley does, you can get little chunks of pastel. You can have cool and warm colors right next to each other. And these little tiny particles sort of vibrate, and it replicates that feeling of translucence.
Thank you, Jamie, for putting links in the chat. He put links to Bill's website and also to his YouTube channel.
Thank you. I mentioned under cool light, you have warm shadows. That's because what makes the light cool, there's more blue rays in there, blue and violet and so on. So if you block a light source that has more blue rays, what you're left with by definition has less blue rays. So in comparison, it's going to be warmer than things in the light. So between light and shadow, there's always a value difference and a temperature difference. And a lot of, when I started out, I could see the value difference pretty quickly. The temperature, this temperature business is like the last thing that we learn as artists of the basics, I think. You know, we get pretty good at seeing shape, and then we learn values, and we get decent at getting the hierarchy of values. And then we get the hierarchy of edges from completely lost to razor sharp. But that last little bit, that last nuance that is so important is this temperature business. And I know when I started out, I remember in my painting class, Ted Smitscavich used to say, "See how it gets cooler on the edge of the face?" And I'd go, "No, I do not see how it gets cooler on the edge of the face." And he'd say, "Give me that brush." He'd take the brush and you put a little strip of blue or violet or something on it. I'd say, "Well, yeah, oh yeah," because when he did it, then I could see it. But after a while, you get to see it. So that's why if you want something easy, there are so many secret handshakes to being an artist. Little things that you need to know. That it's a never-ending process. If you want something easy, take up investment banking or law or whatever. Those things are all easier than this. But that's what makes it interesting, I think. Believe it or not, I'm getting fairly close here.
Tatiana, how do you want to handle the timing?
I'll keep going until you shut me off or until I lose my light. Is there a particular time limit that we run into other than,
We've got people still joining, so.
okay.
But
For those
whenever
of
you
you who
feel,
just joined, you're late.
yeah, whenever you feel you're done would be probably appropriate.
Okay. I need to restate that iris color again because I kind of mushed it all up. So I'm now on like my 6th or 7th restating of that iris. But each time it gets a little closer. So I'm still setting things up, believe it or not. But like I said, I'm getting closer. Now, the lower lid kind of cups up around the eye and it catches the tears that roll down. They call it the tear bag, but it rolls under, so there's shadow under that lower lid. But then at the top, the flat part of that lid is projecting outward and it's catching light too. And a lot of times it's more of a thin little area there. And if it's that light there, it's probably that light over here. And for whatever reason, where the eye kind of flattens out in the corner, where all of this structure is, there tends to be a cooler, lighter area right there. And I'm seeing it in my reference, which I painted from life. So. By the way, a lot of this color nuance, if you're painting in a studio setting, you won't see that from very far away. Our ability to perceive color decreases as the square of the distance. What? Our ability to perceive color decreases as a function of the square of the distance. And I know that's true because the way they measure light strength is in lumens. And lumens, if you look on the back of your technical readout for your light bulbs, you'll discover that the light strength, the number of lumens decreases as a square. So if you go from 1 foot to 2 feet, the light's not half as strong, it's 1/4 as strong because the square of 2 is 4. If you go to 3 feet, it's 1/9 as strong. If you go to 4 feet, it's 1/16. So if you're 20 feet away, you know, 20 times 20 is 400, I think. That's my math is off. So you're 1/400th as strong. So your ability to see all these little subtle color changes rapidly goes to hell. And so if you're in a situation, if you're at the palette and chisel, you now have my permission to get up from your bench, walk up to the front and stick your face 1.5 feet away from the models to look at the color of their eyes. Because if you're 20 feet back, you cannot see that. You can make something up or you could use binoculars to try, but you know, it just won't be there. By the way, this shadow is warm, but where it starts to roll out into the light, it starts to pick up the temperature of the light. So as it rolls out of the warmer shadow area, it starts to get a little cooler.
If folks have to leave us, I want to make sure we all have the chance to thank Bill and to thank Bill for staying beyond the 4 o'clock end time. This has been most illuminating. Thank you, Bill.
No, you're very welcome. I'm happy to talk about art. I'm happy to keep painting until I lose the light. Okay, this is getting sort of the essence of I, but it's somehow lacking something. And I've kept it intentionally nice and soft. So let's talk about what actually happens with the light. You know, our eyes are spherical and they're wet. So that means that the light that hits the cornea, some of that light hits the cornea and bounces straight back at the viewer, and that forms the highlight. But on the opposite corner from that highlight, some of the light goes through the cornea and shines onto the iris. And that creates what I call the spotlight, for lack of a better word. And that spotlight is where you get the true color of the iris because it's being lit up, sort of like it's by a spotlight. And when you put that in, everything looks mushy at this point because you need not only all of these soft edges, but you've got to show something that's a hard edge so that the viewer doesn't just think that their image is out of focus or that you're out of focus or that they've had too many cocktails or whatever. And so when I put in the magic stroke, which is that highlight, it's going to suddenly make this image snap into looking more realistic, he said confidently and hopefully. So I'm going to put the highlight in as a single stroke. I'm not going to blend it and I'm not going to monkey with it. And the highlight on the eye, A, it's not white. And B, it tends to have a shape to it and it's smaller than you think it is. Maybe it's a little larger than that. And if it's that light there, then it's probably this side over here. But by putting that highlight in, and there's probably a little bit on here. But by doing that, it makes the softness look intentional. So and I can keep picking at this for another hour, but I think that you've got the point of what I was trying to demo today, that I kept everything soft. Except for that highlight.
You got some comments in the chat. Thank you, Bill, for fabulous demonstration, beautiful work, awesome demo, very informative, many thanks. Thanks for a very helpful demo, so beautiful, thank you. Would you like me to keep going? Just kidding.
I'm lapping it up. It's awesome. Thank you all for attending. I just hope it's helpful. And, we're all on a journey. And, that's the great thing about art. So anyway, and now I am starting to lose my light. I guess I'll show you, you know what? I'll show you one more thing here. She's got blue-green eyes. If I change the color of the spotlight, it'll change the color of her eye. Watch this. I make this not blue-green, but kind of orangey color down here. And that spotlight is soft. I need to restate my pupil a little bit. But just by changing that area without doing a whole lot on other stuff.
Can you say again the difference between the highlight and the spotlight?
The highlight, the light is hitting the eye and bouncing straight back to the viewer. That's the highlight.
Okay.
Some of where the highlight hits, some of it shines onto the iris and like a little spotlight.
Yeah.
And that's what's creating the spotlight. So I can change her eye. I made that too green before, so I'm not getting the same amount of effect. I'd have to darken this a little bit. But just by changing mostly this area, it changes it from a blue-green eye to a brownish eye. Usually it works a little better than that.
So the spotlight is going to be in the part of the eye that you had earlier painted a lighter blue-green.
Yeah, because it's the part that's being lit up by the light that's shining through the highlight.
In other words,
Anyway.
the lighter blue-green part is not a uniform lighter blue-green. It's also, there's the spotlight within it.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to change it back to blue-green.
No, but in terms of the light.
Yeah. And I could then, see what I mean by I can just keep picking at this for an hour. But you saw the general process that got to this point.
Beautiful.
So there you have it. That's it. Thanks everybody for attending. And don't forget,
Thank you.
go to
Okay,
my
thank you, everybody.
YouTube page. There will be content there.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Thanks,
You're
Bill.
welcome.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you. Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.
Stay safe.
We'll be in touch. Send us ideas for other events, other virtual things. Let's stay in touch this way.
Thank you.